In this episode we are going to turn this into this. So this video started when I posted this image on Twitter, and I got quite a few comments on it and questions about how I did it. So I'm not claiming to be an expert on Blender, the software I used, but I will try to create a simple to follow tutorial on the process I used to create this. The software Blender, it is free software. It's a 3D software that can do a lot of things, and that is one of the problems with it actually, because if you are not familiar with the software, it can be quite scary when you open it the first time. So the aim for me is to keep this as simple as possible and as straightforward as possible. So as long as you follow the steps I describe, you will hopefully end up with a similar result. Blender can be downloaded for Windows, Mac, Linux, and it's even available on Steam. So I will be using 2.93 and hopefully that will be reasonably similar to what you will be using. But first we will start with QGIS. For this to work, I will need some form of background map that will be used to be draped over the terrain. And I will also need some form of elevation data. And I have a global data set with not too high resolution, but I can work with that because I don't need geodata, I need imagery. And if I resample this data, it will look nice enough for the purposes. I've also calculated the statistics, so it's an updated canvas, which gives me all range from black to white in the view. I could use this map canvas to export it to imagery or images by going to project and export map to image. That would probably be good enough. Actually, that will be good enough. Why don't I do that? I will do that. So hopefully I can set a pixel size here. Let's try that and save that. I've done this a couple of times before, so I will just replace my previous images. Replace it, yes. Let's see if that worked. No, it didn't. I need to do something else. So let me try that again. So let me keep near to that and increase the resolution to 300. Draw active decorations, draw annotations, append new reference. No, I don't need that. I don't need that. I don't need that. I'm going to draw on canvas, calculate from there. Yep. Let's see what happens. Elevation, save, yes. Let's see what happens. That's much more like it. Okay, let's do it that way. So I have my elevation layer, and without panning or zooming anything, I'm switching to my map layer and exporting that as well with the same settings. 300. Nothing there is needed. Save. Map. Save. Yes. Let's see what that looks like. Not super high resolution, but it will be good enough for these tests. If you want it to be a better quality, you can probably, and I will probably do that now as well. Bear with me. Export to image at 300 last time. Let's do 600. Map. High quality. Oh, that was not, that was really fast. Yep. That was not good. I don't know why that happened. Let's try that again. Export to map. Change that first. 1000, 1000, and then 300, 600. Ah, get it, got it. That shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, so the actual pixel size doesn't really matter that much. It's the aspect ratio that needs to be the same between the elevation layer and the map layer. And let's see if that looks okay. Yes, it does. And now we have much more detail. So that can be useful. Okay, so I'm done in QGIS, and now we need to open Blender. Let's put that on the main screen. Like that. So this, if you haven't used Blender before, this can be a bit overwhelming, but I will try to boil down the essentials for this process. So first of all, you need to be able to navigate this 3D view, and you do that with a scroll wheel on the mouse. So if you press it down, you will orbit around like this. If you hold shift down when you do that, you will pan around. And if you hold control down, you will scroll or zoom. You can also zoom by simply scrolling on the mouse wheel, but that will, depending on your mouse, be a bit more in steps like this. If you don't have a mouse or you are using a laptop, this will not work, but you can use the tools here up in the right. So if you put your mouse cursor on top of this XYZ symbol and press down, you will be able to rotate it. If you press down on the magnifying glass, you will be able to zoom. And the same if you put it on the hand, you will be able to pan. Here is also a camera symbol, and the camera is this object here. Oops, like that. So by pressing this or 0 on the numpad, you will be shown the view from the camera's perspective. And if you press it again, you will go back. So this will be quite helpful later on, because this is the view that will be rendered when you render your image as a final result. Let's see. Yep, and we have, I will keep the camera. The cube here, I don't need that, so select it, which means you have this outline, and press delete. This is a light source, and I don't need that either, so delete it. However, I will need some form of plane. And to add a plane, you press Shift A and add a mesh in the form of a plane, like that. This is a really simple polygon with 4 vertices, one in each corner. And to convert this to topography, you need a lot more polygons. So to achieve that, we need to go into something that is called edit mode. Right now we are in object mode, as you see here. So we need to change to edit mode. And you can do that here, or you can just press tab to switch between object mode and edit mode. So when you are in edit mode, everything should be selected, and we need to increase the number of polygons. And we do that by subdividing this surface. And you can do that by just holding your mouse cursor above the object, right click and subdivide. That will go from 1 to 4 polygons like this. And we need to repeat that a number of times. You can do it by right click, subdivide, or you can press Shift R to repeat. So 1 click, 2, and you need to repeat this a number of times so that you get a sufficient number of polygons. I think I will try that many. You can always go back to edit mode and add more subdivisions later. But go back to object mode, and now we have our plane subdivided. To apply the elevation to this plane, we need to use a modifier. And modifiers can be found here to the right. So it's this tool panel with a wrench. It's called Modifier Properties. So for the plane, we need to add a modifier. And to deform this plane, we need to use a displace modifier. And you can control the displacement manually by the strength. Right now I will just keep it at, let's say, 0.3. So it's slightly above, but anyway. But we need a texture to control this displacement. And to create that texture or add that texture, we can do that on the texture tab here, but we need to create it first. So just press new here in the displacement modifier settings, and that will create a texture by the name texture. Let's rename that to elevation. And to go here to the texture settings or texture properties, you can use this button to the right here, show texture in texture tab. But you can jump back and forth between the settings here. So you are in the modifier tab and the texture tab. So the texture for elevation should be an image, and let's open and pictures elevation like that, and immediately you see it will displace the oops, the plane like this. So it may not be enough resolution, but we can work with that later. First, let's see, it's a bit too high. So just move down the strength. That's still much too high, but for this demonstration purposes, I think that will be nice enough. So I will add more subdivisions. Let's go into edit mode. So select the plane. You can do that here or in the 3D view and press tab and right click and subdivide once more. Press tab again, and now it's a bit more nice. However, we can use a modifier to subdivide as well. So let's add a modifier that is a subdivision surface modifier. And that needs to be placed on top of the displace modifier, so that the subdivision is done first, then the displacement. You can change the number of subdivisions here, and there's a difference between what is shown in the viewport and what is shown in a render. So if I increase that to 2, that will introduce some artifacts, but we can maybe change that with a shader. So in the 3D view, in object mode, right click and select shade smooth. That might be okay. If we decrease it to 1. Yeah, we can work with that. We have the settings here. I will probably leave it at 1, both for the viewport and render for now. We'll see later when I add the texture how it looks. So the shader, shade smooth. If you don't like it, you can remove it by shade flat instead. So shade flat, shade smooth. So let's add the texture, and the map texture draped over this needs a material, and to add a material to this object, the plane, we go to the Materials tab and add a new material. It should be the default principle BSDF surface, and instead of a color as base color, we click the dot here and select image texture. Then we can go to open, and here we can open our map. And I'll use the high quality one, see what happens. Nothing happens. Well, that's because this view is in solid mode. And here up in the right corner of the 3D view, you have the solid mode, this button. This is a texture preview mode. So if I click that, you get a preview of the texture, like that. But if you want it to be rendered properly, close to the final result, you need to go into render preview mode. And since I deleted the light source previously, the scene will be unlit. So that will be the next step, to add lighting. Lighting can be done in multiple ways. The way I will show you now is looks really good, and you have a lot of control over a scene like this. But it will require a change in the render engine. So if you go to the render properties, you will see that the render engine is set to Eevee as default. And we need to change that to cycles. Eevee is really fast, but it takes a lot of shortcuts. And cycles is much better at shadows and ambient occlusion and such. So, and for the lighting style I've selected, it requires cycles. However, it will be a bit more taxing on the computer, so you may need to lower your expectations for the render results or render speed, or change your settings a bit if you have a slower computer. But if you have a reasonably fast computer, this will not be a problem. So to add lighting, we go to the world properties, and here you have color settings, and like before, we don't want to use a color, we want to use something else. So press the button or the dot next to color, and here you select sky texture, and that will generate or simulate a sun and sky settings. So you get a sun size. So if you go very small, you will get sharper edges on the shadows because the sun or light source is really small. If you go up to a larger size, the shadows will be much softer. But the sun isn't this big, so I will stick at, let's say, 1. I can select that field and press 1 degree. That is big enough and will give me some softness in the shadows. The intensity of the sun, it's a bit bright, so let's reduce that. Also, we have the strength, can reduce that. And I've found that quite low values give the best result. We also have sun elevation. So right now it's at 15 degrees. And if we increase that, the sun will be higher and the shadows will be shorter. And if we go the other way, shadows will be really long. But I will stay at, let's say, 17 degrees. The sun rotation, right now it's coming from the north, and the sun rarely comes from the north. So I want to try to have my sun in the west, so the shadows will be to the east. So I will move the sun to something like 60 degrees maybe. It's still north-ish, but since this is a computer simulation, total reality is not really necessary. Let's put it at 70. I think that looks quite good. And you can also play with the altitude and these 3 settings here. If you increase the air settings, it will make it redder or more yellow. I don't know why or what this setting does. But you can play with these settings some to get the result you desire. And the closer to 1 you are, the more realistic the light seems. I think that's reasonable enough. So you remember the camera? The camera view is the default one, or the view is the same as before. But if you want this as the camera view, there's a shortcut for that, and that is pressing Ctrl, Alt, and 0 on the numpad. That will switch to camera view and move the camera to the current view. But you may still want to change the view in the rendered image. And to do that, you need to open the settings in the 3D view, and that's the small arrow up here in the corner. So if you click there, you will get these settings. And in the View tab, you have a checkbox that says Camera to View. If you check that, you can now pan around inside the camera view, which essentially moves the camera. You can also zoom and pan and so on. So that might be a good view for this image, maybe. So we can try that. And to render that view, you go to Render and Render Image. You can also press F12. And this may take some time. The more cores you have, the faster it will be. I wonder what resolution I'm rendering at. Yep, I will stop this. Hopefully Blender won't crash. No. The render settings are in the render properties here. No, it's this one, output properties. Here I can change the aspect ratio of the image, and I can change the percentage. So if I want to just quickly render a test, I can use it at 50%. So let me press F12 now. Hopefully this will be quicker. The more cores you have in your CPU, the faster this will be. And you can also set up a Blender to use a graphics card. That will also perhaps make it faster. And this will hopefully be okay. Yep, I think that's quite okay. Now you can play with the settings. So you can go to the modifiers and change subdivisions or the elevation. You can go to the materials or the textures. Let's see, displays, and where do we have the material? No, the world settings. And so you can play with the lighting. So maybe a less intense. And go down in strength as well. I'll uncheck the camera to view so I can rotate to another view. as you saw, there are black parts here, and that is because the plane isn't bigger than it is. So I can fix that by adding another plane. So Shift A, plane, and then we scale that, and there's a scale tool here. You can also press S on the keyboard, S, and just make it big. Press the mouse button again, and I can move it down by using this tool, move, or G on the keyboard. So G, and lock it to the Z direction by pressing Z, and then down, and let's have it about there. And then we go back to activate the camera view, zoom out. Maybe I want an Instagram format. So then it will be 1080 by 1080. Yeah, enter, and well, that might be nice. So I think I'll stop there and render this out in 100% and wrap this up. So hopefully this has given you enough information so you can do this yourself by generating elevation images and a map image. And it doesn't have to be OpenStreetMap. It can be anything. It can be a satellite layer or whatever you want. And you can play around with the light, the amount, the strength of the displacement. And you can animate the 3D scene into a movie. You can add 3D objects that you create yourself or that you import from some form of source from the internet. And yeah, Blender is extremely powerful, and you can do really a lot with it. So hopefully this will help you get started with Blender. But as I started with, I'm in no way an expert on this, so I have followed a lot of YouTube instructions in order to get this far. But as long as I keep it simple and just add the plane and the modifiers I've shown you and textures like this, it's reasonably easy to do this whenever I need it. Yeah, that is all. See you next time.